The rain had not stopped for 3 days. The sky stayed dark as if it too was in mourning. On the edge of a quiet alien village, an alien woman knelt beside a small, freshly dug grave. Her clothes were soaked. Her hands were shaking. She didn't care. She had no reason to care anymore. Her name was Lyra, and the name written on the grave was Kiri, her child. Lyra pressed her forehead to the wet ground. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Her voice broke with every word. "I wasn't strong enough to protect you." The grave was tiny, too tiny, just the size of a small child. Around her, the other villagers had left long ago. Some offered kind words, some only pity. No one stayed. No one knew what to say to a mother who had lost everything. But someone was still watching. From a distance, hidden behind thick trees and mist, a human man stood silently. His name was Jack. He had been there for hours. His coat was soaked, boots deep in mud. His eyes never left the woman by the grave. He knew something she didn't. The child buried in that grave was not really there. Lyra had made the grave herself, after days of searching the mountains. She had found a piece of her child's clothing, stained and torn, in the wreckage of a landslide. No body, just the small shoe and the blood. She had begged the searchers to keep looking, but they gave up. The rocks crushed everything, they told her. No one could survive that. So she made a grave for what she had, a shoe, a piece of cloth, and her last hope. Jack had arrived on this planet for trade, but when the storm came, he had taken shelter in the mountains. That's when he found the little alien child, hurt, cold, barely breathing, half buried under rubble. The child had clung to life. Jack didn't know what to do at first. He wasn't from this world. He didn't speak the alien language well, but he couldn't leave the child to die. So he carried the small body through snow and wind to his cabin. He made a fire. He wrapped the child in blankets. Day after day, he fought to keep the child alive. He didn't even know the child's name until she whispered it in her sleep. Kiri. That name hit Jack like a rock. Later, when he asked a local merchant about a missing child named Kiri, the man told him the sad news. She died in the mountains. Her mother buried her a few days ago. But Jack knew that was wrong. Kiri was alive. Weak, but alive. He had saved her. So why was he still hiding? Because the mother looked broken. Jack didn't know how she would react. Would she believe him? Or blame him for taking her daughter? The village didn't trust humans, and Jack was a stranger. He had tried to write a message, tried to talk to a translator, but something always stopped him. Now, as Lyra cried in the rain, Jack clenched his fists. He couldn't watch anymore. Back at his cabin, Kiri was waiting. She had started sitting up, eating soft food. Her big eyes still looked scared sometimes, but she was healing. Every time Jack walked in the room, she smiled a little, but she always said one word before sleeping. Mama. Jack lowered his head. He couldn't keep the secret any longer. He took one step out of the trees, then another, but before he could call out, something happened. Lyra stood slowly, her body shaking. She placed a single flower on the grave, a soft blue flower that only bloomed during storms. Her lips trembled. She whispered something in her native tongue. Jack couldn't understand it, but he didn't need to. He saw the meaning in her eyes. She was saying goodbye. Jack's heart tightened. He opened his mouth to speak, but a voice came through his earpiece, a soft sound, a child's voice. Papa? It was Kiri. She was awake, looking for him. Lyra didn't hear the voice. She had already turned away, walking slowly back toward the village, each step heavy. Jack stood frozen. He had waited too long. But tomorrow, he would not wait anymore. Tomorrow he would bring the truth, and the child. The memory of that day never left Lyra's mind. It haunted her every second. Every time she blinked, She saw it again. The sky had been full of heavy gray clouds. Thunder rolled in the distance and sharp winds danced through the forest trees. But little Kiri, her daughter, had been playing by the riverbank, laughing like she always did. Her tiny hands reached for glowing stones in the shallow water, her laughter echoing like bells. Not too far, Kiri, Lyra had warned from the field, picking wild fruits for dinner. The rain is coming. Kiri turned and waved. I'm okay, Mama. Then it happened. The ground trembled, just a little at first. Birds scattered from the trees. The animals went silent. Then came the loud cracking sound. The mountain above them groaned like it was waking from a long sleep. Lyra's eyes shot up. A landslide. Kiri! She screamed, dropping her basket, and running. But she was too far. Rocks and dirt fell like an angry waterfall. Huge boulders rolled, trees snapped, the earth itself tore apart. She sprinted, screaming her daughter's name. Dust filled the air, choking her. The sky turned brown. She reached the edge of the fallen path and froze. The place where Kiri had been just seconds ago was gone. A thick blanket of dirt and rock now covered everything. No, Lyra whispered, collapsing to her knees. She dug with her bare hands, fingers bleeding, calling her daughter's name again and again. Others from the village came running. They helped dig. They searched for hours, but the earth had swallowed her child whole. All they found was a small shoe, torn and stained. Lyra screamed when she saw it. That was the last day Lyra smiled. Across the mountain on that very same day, a human scavenger named Jack was searching the edges of the storm for rare minerals. He wasn't looking for trouble, just trying to make a living on a planet that wasn't his home. He had no idea what had just happened nearby, but as he scanned with his gear, his device beeped. Life form detected, weak, small, buried. He thought it was a glitch, but the beep continued. Jack followed the signal. Climbing over fallen trees and broken ground, he reached a part of the mountain that looked recently destroyed. Rocks still steamed from heat and pressure. The wind howled, but the signal stayed, strong. Then he saw it, movement, just a finger, barely poking out from under the rubble. Jack dropped his bag and rushed forward. Cree! Cree! He shouted, hoping someone else was nearby. No answer. He dug fast, not thinking about safety. He pushed rocks aside, dirt flying everywhere. Then he saw her face, pale, covered in dust, not breathing. A little alien girl, no older than 5. Jack's hands shook. He checked for signs of life, a heartbeat, faint, slowing. No, 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 Jack muttered, lifting her in his arms. Stay with me. He wrapped her in his coat and ran. Not back to the village. He didn't even know where the village was. He ran toward his shuttle cabin, hidden deep in the woods. It took hours to reach the cabin. The child burned with fever. She coughed once. Then again. Jack made a fire, heated water, used every bit of first aid knowledge he had. He didn't know her species, didn't know her language, but she was a child and he wasn't going to let her die. He stayed by her side for 3 nights. She barely moved. But on the 4th night, her eyes fluttered open. Jack sighed with relief. You're safe now, he whispered. She looked at him weakly. Her lips moved. She said one word. Mama. Jack's heart cracked. He didn't know her name yet. He didn't know she had a mother who cried every day thinking her child was dead. He only knew she was alive. Because of him. Back in the village, Lyra sat in silence. Villagers tried to comfort her. Some brought food, some offered prayers, but none helped. She stopped speaking. She stopped eating. Every day she returned to the tiny grave she made for her daughter, placing wildflowers beside it, talking to the earth. I miss you, she whispered. I hope it didn't hurt. She didn't know that miles away, her child was breathing, healing, waiting, and Jack was now facing a problem. What would he do when she was fully awake? What would he say if she asked for her mother? He was a stranger here, a human among aliens. He had no right to keep the child, but he also had no idea how to return her safely. The planet was not kind to humans. He had seen other travelers attacked, just for wandering too far. But Jack wasn't afraid for himself. He was afraid for the little girl. He looked down at her as she slept. "I'll find a way," he whispered. "I promise." The cabin was old and hidden deep in the mountains, covered in moss and surrounded by tall, cold trees. Wind howled through the cracks in the walls, but inside it was warm. Jack had built the cabin himself during his first year on this alien world. It wasn't big, but it had everything he needed: tools, supplies, heat, and now, a small bed near the fireplace where an alien child slept under thick blankets. Kiri. She still looked weak, but the color was returning to her cheeks. Her tiny hands, once cold and stiff, now curled around a soft cloth Jack had given her. She clutched it like it was treasure. Jack sat nearby, cleaning a bowl. He had made her soup. Again. It was all he could think to do. He wasn't a father. He wasn't even used to being around kids. But he had seen the way she looked at him when she woke up, at first fear, then confusion, then trust. Now, every time he left the room, she stared at the door until he came back. She didn't speak much, just short words in her language. But one word came out again and again. "Mama." Jack's chest tightened every time she said it. He hadn't told her. Not yet. How could he? That morning, Jack walked outside to get water. The snow had melted a little and fresh light shined through the trees. He filled his jug at the stream, then froze. He heard a sound. Soft, gentle, a voice. It was Kiri, inside the cabin. Jack rushed back in. She was sitting up, her small legs hanging over the bed, humming a lullaby. It wasn't in human language, but Jack knew what it was. A mother's song. She must have heard Lyra sing it before. Jack swallowed hard. "You remember the song?" he asked softly. Kiri looked at him and smiled. "Mama sang it." Jack knelt beside her. "Your mama is special. She loves you very much." Kiri blinked. "She's gone." Jack looked down. He didn't know how to say the truth. He couldn't tell her she was believed dead, that her mother was crying every day at a grave that didn't hold her body. So he stayed silent. For now. Later that day, Jack connected to his old scanner and opened a map. He found the location of the alien village again. It wasn't far. A 2-hour walk if weather allowed. He marked it on a paper and folded it into his coat pocket. He stood in the doorway of the cabin, staring out into the trees. He couldn't hide Kiri forever. She needed her mother. But fear kept pulling at him. Would the villagers believe him? Would they take Kiri and never let him see her again? Would they think he had kidnapped her? Then he heard something behind him. "Papa?" He turned. Kiri was standing by the fire, wrapped in a blanket, eyes wide. She had called him Papa. Jack's heart froze. He walked over and knelt down. "Why did you call me that?" Kiri looked confused. "You stay. You feed me. You hold me when I cry." Jack's throat tightened. "You're not Papa?" Jack took her tiny hand in his. "No, I'm not your Papa. But I'll stay with you as long as you need me." She nodded, slowly, then hugged him. Jack held her close, staring at the folded map in his coat. Maybe it was time. The next morning, Jack packed a small bag, just food, medicine, and warm clothes. Kiri wore one of his old shirts tied around her waist in a blanket like a cloak. "Where we go?" she asked. "To see someone," Jack said. "Someone very special." Kiri tilted her head. "Mama?" Jack didn't answer. He only smiled. The walk was slow. Kiri was still weak, so Jack carried her most of the way. Snow crunched under his boots and mist curled around the trees like ghosts. Every time he looked at her, he wondered how her mother would react. He didn't know what would happen. He just hoped it would be good. That night they stopped near a hill just outside the village. Jack could see the rooftops in the distance. Lanterns glowed in the dark and smoke rose from chimneys. Kiri was asleep in his arms, her head against his chest. Then he saw movement, a figure, alone, standing by a small grave in the rain. It was Lyra. Again. Jack stepped back, hiding behind a tree. His heart pounded. She was still visiting the grave, still weeping, still believing her child was gone forever. Jack looked down at Kiri. Her breath was slow, peaceful. Then he looked at Lyra again. It was time. Tomorrow, he would walk into that village. Tomorrow, everything would change. Lyra no longer felt alive. She walked through the village like a shadow, silent, hollow, and cold. Her once bright eyes were now dull. Her skin had lost its glow. People whispered as she passed. She still visits the grave every night. She doesn't eat. She talks to the air, like her child is still there. Some felt pity. Some stayed away, but no one helped. No one understood the pain of a mother who had buried her child with her own hands. Every night Lyra returned to the same spot, the small grave under the weeping tree. She didn't speak anymore. She just knelt there, tracing the name Kiri with her fingers, rain soaking her clothes, lips too tired to cry. But something inside her had changed. The grief had turned sharp. One morning, Lyra stood in the village square, staring at a group of strangers. They were traders from off-world, humans and aliens alike. One human caught her eye, a tall man with a thick beard laughing with a merchant. Her eyes narrowed. A human. Her heartbeat quickened. Ever since Kiri's death, she had begun to feel it. Something wasn't right. A mother's instinct. A whisper in her bones. What if the child didn't die? She had buried a shoe, not a body. She had seen blood, but not enough. Could someone have found her baby? No. No one would help a dying alien child, not unless it was a human. She had heard rumors, strange ones. A lone human traveler seen near the mountains around the same time her child went missing. He had built a small cabin. He rarely came to the village. No one knew what he was doing up there. Lyra's eyes locked on the bearded human. You, she said softly. He turned confused. Me? Did you come from the mountains? The man raised a brow. Few days ago. Why? Lyra stepped forward. Her voice was low, trembling. Did you see a human man, tall with dark hair, traveling alone? The man shrugged. Might have passed someone. Can't say for sure. Was he carrying a child? Now the man frowned. No idea. Lyra's hands balled into fists. The crowd stared. She turned and walked away, but something inside her snapped. She needed answers. That night, she met with the village guards. I want a search party, she said. I want to go back to the mountains. The guard captain shook his head. We've searched that place already. The storm, my child might still be alive. Lyra, I saw her. In a dream. The captain sighed. Dreams won't change what we found. You need to rest. Please go home. Lyra slammed her hands on the table. If you won't help me, I'll go alone. The captain stood, frustrated. Enough. The human you speak of, and we've heard rumors, he's hiding something, but there's no proof. Do not stir trouble. Lyra left in silence, but her mind was boiling. The next morning, a notice appeared in the village. Reward offered. For information about a human traveler from the mountains. Anyone with knowledge of his activities, speak to Lyra. Immediately, the villagers were shocked. Is she accusing a human of kidnapping? Has she gone mad? Some thought she had finally lost her mind. But one old woman came to Lyra that evening. I saw him once, the woman said. Tall man, human. He passed through the village weeks ago, had a bundle on his back, something small, like a wrapped-up child. Lyra froze, her breath caught in her throat. Where did he go? He didn't speak, just nodded and walked north, toward the hills. At the same time, Jack sat near the fireplace in his cabin holding Kiri's tiny hand. She had drawn something on a scrap of cloth, a stick figure with two others beside it. One had long ears like hers. The second had messy hair like Jack. The third was bigger and smiling. He pointed at the drawing. "Is that me?" she giggled. "Yes, Papa." "And this?" he asked, pointing at the big smiling one. She looked serious. "Mama," Jack nodded. "Tomorrow. We'll find her." Kiri's eyes lit up. But outside, the wind carried a new sound. Footsteps. Lyra was coming, alone, her eyes full of fury, her hands clutching a sharp branch like a weapon. Her mind was wild with grief and hope. If this human had her child, she would take her back. If he lied, she didn't know what she would do. The sky was red with the light of early dawn when Jack opened the door to his cabin. He had packed a small bag, just food, medicine, and warm clothes. Today was the day. He would bring Kiri home. He would return her to the mother who mourned a child not yet dead. But Jack didn't know. He was already being watched. Lyra crouched in the trees, eyes wide, heart racing. She saw him step outside. The same human she had seen once before in the village, just passing through. Now here he was in the wild, walking out of a cabin with a small child. Her child. Kiri. Lyra almost cried out, but her voice caught in her throat. She gripped the tree beside her. The child was alive. Alive. Tears filled her eyes. She wanted to run forward, to shout her daughter's name. But her grief had turned to something else now. Fear. Why had the human kept Kiri hidden? Why hadn't he returned her? What if he had taken her on purpose? The reward notice had reached the wrong ears. Some guards, already suspicious of Jack, had followed Lyra secretly. When they saw her watching the cabin, they acted fast. 3 of them stormed from the woods. "Get the human!" Jack barely had time to turn before the first guard tackled him to the ground. Kiri screamed. Jack shouted, "Wait, let me explain." But another guard grabbed his arms and twisted them behind his back. Kiri cried and tried to run to him, but one of the guards picked her up roughly. "No, Papa, Papa!" Lyra rushed forward, eyes on her daughter. "Kiri, Kiri!" The child turned. Their eyes met. "Mama!" That one word made everything stop for a moment. Lyra dropped to her knees. Her heart stopped beating. Her child was not a ghost, not a dream, not a memory. She was real. Kiri reached for her. "Mama!" But the guards didn't stop. Jack was dragged toward a vehicle, his wrists bound, his face pressed into the dirt. He didn't fight. "I found her!" Jack yelled. "I didn't. Take her. I saved her." "Silence, human," one guard snapped. "She would have died if I hadn't pulled her from the rocks." Lyra stood frozen. Her daughter clutched her, crying, "Don't hurt him. Don't hurt Papa." The village square was full when they returned. People gathered to see what had happened. Rumors had already spread. They caught the human. "He took the child. Maybe he's a criminal." Lyra followed behind, holding Kiri close. The child didn't stop crying. Jack was pushed into the center of the crowd. The guards stood around him. Lyra stepped forward. "Is this the man?" asked the village elder. Lyra nodded slowly. "He was found living in the woods. With your daughter?" Lyra didn't speak. She just stared at Jack. Jack met her eyes. His voice was calm but heavy with pain. "I didn't steal her." "Then, why didn't you return her?" the elder asked. "I didn't know who she was at first. She was buried under rock, dying. I only heard her whisper her name. Days later." The elder frowned. "Then why didn't you come to us?" "I tried. I asked around. I didn't want to scare her. I didn't want to lose her." "She is not yours," the guard said coldly. "I know," Jack whispered. "But I loved her like she was." Kiri pulled her mother's hand. "Mama, he saved me. He gave me soup. He made fire. He stayed. Lyra fell to her knees. She held Kiri tight. "I thought I lost you," she whispered. "I buried your shoe." Kiri nodded. "I was cold, but he found me. He carried me." The villagers were silent. No one had ever heard of a human risking so much for one of their kind. Especially not a child. Especially not when no one was watching. The elder looked at Jack. "Let him go." The guards hesitated. Lyra finally stood. Her voice was quiet but firm. "He's not the villain. He's the reason I'm holding my daughter." The guards released Jack. He rubbed his wrists, wincing. Kiri ran into his arms, crying. Lyra stepped closer. They stood like that for a long moment. Mother, child, and the stranger who became a protector. Finally, Lyra whispered, "Come home with us. Just for tonight." Jack looked at her unsure, but Kiri pulled his sleeve. "Please." He nodded. Not as a prisoner, not as a stranger, but as the man who brought a child back from the grave. Lyra sat in silence, watching the fire dance in her small stone home. Kiri lay asleep on a soft bed nearby, her breathing calm and steady. She was wrapped in warm blankets, holding a little stuffed animal another child had given her. Her cheeks were pink. Her face looked peaceful. Lyra couldn't stop staring at her. For so many days, she had visited a grave. For so many nights, she had cried herself to sleep, whispering her daughter's name to the wind, and now she was home. Alive. Real. She touched Kiri's hair gently, her fingers trembling. Tears filled her eyes, hot and heavy. She pressed her forehead to her daughter's, letting the tears fall freely. "Forgive me," she whispered. "I gave up too, soon." In the corner of the room, Jack stood awkwardly, unsure if he should be there. He had refused the offer to stay the night 3 times. But Kiri had begged. "Please, Papa, don't leave me." Lyra had looked at him then. Really looked. Not as a stranger, not as a thief, but as the man who kept her child alive. "You protected her," Lyra had said softly. "She calls you Papa." Jack had nodded. "I didn't ask her to, but I didn't stop her either." Now, standing in the same room, Jack watched the reunion of mother and child and felt like an outsider. He turned to leave, but Lyra spoke. "Wait." He paused. "Stay," she said. "Please." Jack turned slowly. "I don't know the right words," she said, "but I know. I want you here." Later that night, Lyra set 2 cups of tea on the small table. Jack sat across from her, looking uncomfortable. His eyes were tired, his hands rough from days of travel. "You didn't have to do it," Lyra said, staring into her cup. Jack looked up. "You didn't know her. You could have walked away. Left her there." Jack nodded slowly. "I thought about it." Lyra blinked, surprised by his honesty. "But I couldn't. She was just a child. Hurt, scared, buried in dirt. How could I walk away?" Lyra swallowed hard. "She cried for you," Jack continued. "Every night." "Mama," she said, over and over. Lyra covered her mouth, tears welling up again. "I didn't know your name. Didn't know who to trust, but I kept her safe. I gave her food, I taught her to smile again." "She still cries in her sleep," Lyra whispered. "But now, she smiles too." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the fire crackle. Then, Lyra said something unexpected. "She called you Papa." Jack nodded. "Do you want her to stop?" Jack looked into the fire. "I don't know. She loves you," Lyra said. "I love her too," Jack whispered. The next morning, Kiri ran through the village like nothing had ever happened. Other children greeted her with surprise and joy. The adults watched carefully, still unsure what to believe. But when Kiri pointed at Jack and shouted, "That's my Papa," no one laughed. They only stared. The same human they had feared had done what none of them could. He had brought a child back from death. At the village well, a group of mothers approached Lyra. "We heard the truth," one said. "Is it really him?" Lyra nodded. "Yes, he saved her." The others were silent. Then one smiled. "You're lucky. Most of us wouldn't have survived that pain." Another added, "He's not one of us, but maybe he's meant to be." That evening, Kiri sat between Lyra and Jack, holding one of their hands in each of hers. She looked at both with her wide eyes. "I want both," she said. "Mama and Papa." Lyra smiled through her tears. Jack looked stunned. "But I'm not really your papa," he said. Kiri leaned her head against his arm. "You are to me." Lyra looked at Jack and whispered, "She's right." He turned to her slowly. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," Lyra said softly, "don't go." Outside the house, the tiny grave under the weeping tree still remained. But now, instead of sorrow, it held something else. Hope. A single blue flower still grew beside it, and beside the flower, someone had placed a small wooden carving. 3 figures. A mother, a child, and a human. It had been 3 days since Kiri was returned to her mother. The sun now warmed the village after weeks of storms, and the cold wind had softened into a gentle breeze. Birds sang again. Lyra smiled again, and Kiri laughed again. But Jack was preparing to leave. He stood near the forest's edge, tightening the strap on his travel bag. He looked back at the village, the small houses, the stone paths, the children playing, and at the little home where Lyra and Kiri lived. He had stayed long enough, he thought. This wasn't his world. These weren't his people. He had done his part. Now it was time to go. But deep inside, something ached. Back at the house, Kiri looked out the window and saw him. She dropped her toy and ran to her mother. "Mama, Papa's leaving." Lyra stood still for a moment. She had known this was coming. Still, it hurt. Kiri grabbed her hand. "We have to stop him!" They ran through the village, calling his name. The villagers watched as the little girl and her mother chased after the human who had once been feared. Jack heard footsteps behind him. He turned and froze. Lyra stood there, holding Kiri's hand, both out of breath. "You weren't going to say goodbye?" she asked. Jack smiled gently. "Didn't want it to be harder than it already is." Kiri ran into his arms, tears in her eyes. "Please don't go." "I have to, little one. I don't belong here." "Yes, you do," she cried. "You belong with us." Jack hugged her tight. His eyes met Lyra's over Kiri's head. "I saved her. That's all I came to do." Lyra stepped forward. "No," she said softly. "You did more." Jack raised a brow. "You didn't just save her," Lyra said. "You saved me too." She looked down, then back up at him. "I was dying, Jack, every day. I smiled for others, but inside I was already in the grave with her." "I didn't know what else to do," Jack whispered, "but you did it. You carried her. You gave her warmth, food, love. She calls you Papa, and she means it." Jack's throat tightened. Lyra reached into her pocket and pulled out something small, a silver ring shaped like a leaf. "This was my husband's," she said. "He died in the last war. I never thought I'd give it to anyone again." She placed it in Jack's hand. "But I want you to have it." Jack stared at it, stunned. "What does this mean?" he asked. Lyra took a breath. Her voice was shaking. "It means, if you stay, you'll never be alone again." Kiri reached up and grabbed both their hands. "Be my Papa. For real." Jack looked down at her, then at Lyra. Everything inside him wanted to say yes, but he hesitated. "Are you sure? I'm not from your world, I'm different." Lyra smiled. "Then it's perfect. She'll grow up knowing that love doesn't care about species." A pause. Then Jack nodded. "I'll stay," Kiri shouted with joy and hugged him tight. Lyra let out a shaky breath. the pain in her chest finally breaking apart like glass in sunlight. That night, the villagers gathered. A fire was lit in the center of the square. Food was shared. Music played. They welcomed Jack, not as a stranger, not as an outsider, but as one of their own. An old storyteller raised a cup and said, "To the man who gave back what was lost." Everyone cheered. Lyra sat beside Jack, their hands touching. Kiri danced around the fire, laughing louder than anyone. Later, under the stars, Jack stood beside the tiny grave under the weeping tree. He placed a small wooden carving on the stone. Kiri, smiling and holding both her parents' hands, Lyra walked up beside him. "We can leave it here," she said, as a reminder not of death but of what came back to life. Jack nodded. He whispered to the grave, "She's safe now." Then Lyra took his hand and looked into his eyes. "You saved my child," she said softly. "So I'll save you. From the loneliness you never spoke about." Jack closed his eyes, and for the first time in years he felt home.